If you're a B2B business, a B2B tech company, or a B2B marketer, you're in the right place. Coming to you from Studio 26, this is the Interesting B2B Marketers podcast, bringing you interesting contemporary takes, industry tips, guest interviews, and true stories from B2B marketers in the trenches. Now, here's your host, Steve Goldhaber.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Studio 26. This is Steve with the Interesting B2B Marketers podcast. All right, I am joined by Amy today. Amy, you and I go back in time. We've worked for the same company in some form or another, but it's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, give the audience the 60-second intro about who you are and what you've been up to.
Great. Well, I'm Amy Littleton. I am president of Stretch PR. I've been in the PR agency business for about 20 years, operating agencies on behalf of other folks, and started my own firm recently. We specialize in creative full service public relations, kind of outbound reputation and brand building work, media relations, social media, executive positioning, thought leadership, brand activation, those kinds of disciplines. We do a lot in the B2B space, having worked across many industries, including insurance and financial services and professional services, but also we have a consumer practice as well. So I'm happy to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Nice. All right. Awesome. So like we always do on the podcast, we jump right into the case studies. The first one is about a bigger company in the insurance space. And you're going to share a case that has to do with thought leadership and getting to that thought leadership and not just like the very fragmented, hey, let's do social media blasts all the time, but something more meaningful. So
yeah,
take it away on case study number one.
Great. So I thought it would be interesting to just share the importance of data and research and how that can be used globally, regionally, and locally. You know, when you're communicating in the B2B space, you're trying to sell products, you're trying to sell services, but you're really trying to sell you, your company, as the smartest person in the room, as the entity that knows the most and has the best talent and has the best solutions and understands, customers' challenges in the most meaningful way. And data and research is a great way to do that. Can be as simple as, a little poll. But for the case study here, we're talking about a large global organization that has thousands and thousands of executives and customers that are in the CRM that are there available to, and that, audience is available to be mined. And this doesn't have to be, any company doesn't have to be global to make this kind of strategy work. But for this case, it's a survey of executives across the globe, really looking at what are their key issues and challenges that they face and what are they seeing on the horizon, what's keeping them up at night, and then turning that into a piece of content that is showing what across the globe people are thinking about, executives of businesses, as well as regionally, what's happening in the US, what's happening in Europe, and slicing it even further down to specific markets, what's happening in Illinois, what's happening in Chicago. What do the folks in the Chicago region, what are they most concerned about in their businesses and in their practices? What macroeconomic conditions are affecting them? What are the challenges there? And how can, on the backside, this company bring solutions to help with those challenges? So that's kind of the idea.
Yeah, I think it's great when companies will actually engage the intended audience for who the thought leadership is for in the actual research. Because from a marketing perspective, it's a customer touch point, right? You're reaching out saying, do you want to participate in this? And then once it's done, they're going to read it on the back end. So you're getting their share of mind and they're doing it in a way where it's part of that brand experience. When you collected the information, like how was the survey? Was it a survey? Was it in person? How did they collect it?
In this case, it was a survey. So there are, clients across the globe to tap into. But for folks that are listening today, they might be, thinking, how could we execute something like this? And there's a lot of ways to do it. Not only fielding your own survey with your own customers, but also partnering with a media organization or academia, where you can really use different audiences to build around those, to get those data points. But what's interesting about it is not just producing the survey and then serving it up to folks with the insights, which is certainly important, but it is all of the work product that goes around promoting that and using that content to leverage in multiple ways. So, I think that is where you get the real bang for the buck when it comes to ROI. You produce the report, and these things are not cheap to produce. A report of some sort And then you slice it up. You have a global opportunity for media relations, for example. You can go into the local markets with media relations for, national business media or even down to local podcasts and business radio, newspapers, et cetera. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and one of the speakers on the stage referred to this very report I'm thinking of. And
Yeah.
it was like, it was done about a year and a half ago, and it's still coming up in conversation and on the stage at this conference because it is a proof point of what's happening in the industry and why people should care about the topics that are being discussed by the company.
Yeah, that's great. What is the duration that you actually need to field it? So, are we talking like a month or two? How long does that take?
Well, it really depends on the size and scale. These things do not have to be so time intensive, although they can be. And it just really depends on the appetite, the budget, how readily available the data sources are, how your marketing engine can coalesce around it to really, amplify across multiple channels. But, we've also done some very easy LinkedIn polls, for example, where you go on and you capture a bunch of content in quick hits and turn around and produce it out in the content marketing. So it can be the spectrum of intense and complex and very simple and quick.
Yep. So, the example I always like to refer to on the type of thought leadership you're talking about is the Edelman Trust Barometer. I feel like that was pretty early on where they just said, you know what, we're doing research on this space. We want to own this space. And they do it every year. And now, I mean, it's got to be 15, 20 years they've been doing this. And now the interesting parts are not even like the annual, refreshes. It's all the trend data to see what's been happening over the last 5 or 10 years. And I think that's really, as far as like owning a piece of thought leadership, once you have 5, 10 years under your belt, that's a great place to be because it's a well-oiled machine and people view you as, look, you've been around. You really know this space. How many years for this company were they doing this?
I would say at least a decade,
Yeah.
probably more than that. I'd have to go back, but it would probably be 10 to 15 years, yeah. And you're right, it is that trend data because, going back to, when you think about September 11th and those kinds of things that were really important back then, or the recent pandemic and how much that played into the decisions, and people may or may not have predicted that was going to happen, and then how it impacted them. So to see that over time, you can see those macro trends play in the data and how people are feeling about things.
Yeah. So this company's been doing it a while. It's got to be working, but now I'm kind of going into what were the measures of success. So when they do the readout of, look, we've done another report, we've sent it out. What do you look for? Like, what's your scorecard to measure the success of it?
Well, immediately it is the announcement. So we've done everything from have a, press conference in New York or in London. We've had ideas of partnering with doing it at the Global Economic Forum, kind of announcing there, using platforms that exist, as well as coordinated global communications effort and marketing effort. So launching on the same day, releasing to news media, sometimes doing a exclusive with a certain news organization, then translating it across the globe for the different markets. But that's really just the initial launch. From there, it is how do you trickle it down into the local markets and slice and dice the data to make it relevant for various markets. So you might be going into New York City and you want to focus on New York City content. So it is the initial launch and then an entire rollout that takes a long time to really squeeze as much as you can out of the thought leadership.
Yeah. Tell us more about the exclusive approach. And it doesn't have to be just for this company, but I'd love for you to share with the listeners just that angle of, hey, we'll give you something if you want to be the first to have it. Like, how does that go down? What do you share? What do you not share when you try to cultivate that type of an approach?
If I could shift gears to another quick case study, this will really underscore that. There was
Yeah.
a recent client that is in the healthcare industry, nurses, doctors, just the entire healthcare provider space, and did a big study, the largest of its kind, about what's happening in nursing and, kind of how nurses are feeling and what's happening with talent shortages, with burnout, et cetera. And so we used the approach of doing an exclusive, but it was more of an advance. So if you use the term exclusive, you're really saying, I'm going to take this to one news outlet. They're going to get it exclusively, and then I'll roll it out to everyone else. Well, this was more of an advance because there are so many organizations that we knew would want this, and we wanted them to have it because it was important content. So we didn't want to give it to one exclusively. We wanted to give it to about 7 as an advance. So they knew others were going to get it, but they were going to be getting it a little bit sooner. And they were agreed not to release it until the specific time that we noted. And at that time, we were having a press conference and we were sharing it over the newswire and really broadcasting it more broadly to all media, traditional and non-traditional. And so the deal is we will provide you with the content early, the study and the data early, give you time to digest it and produce your content if you agree not to release it until a certain time.
Yeah. How often in that scenario do they play by the rules? Because I've been involved in some of those where you think they're going to do exactly what you want as far as release dates, and they just run with the story 3 days in advance because they literally they want to break the news. So how do you manage that?
Well, you manage that through really good relationships with the journalists because they know, that's going to be the last time you ever give them that shot. If they do that, and if you have a good relationship and you really appreciate that relationship, it's on both sides, both the journalistic side and the PR side, they usually will kind of play by the unwritten rule that we're going to go at this right time. And sometimes, I've had it happen where everyone agrees on it and then, a very excited, trigger happy web person turns it on before you're ready. So, things do happen. But at that point, the ball is rolling down the hill and, usually there's not a lot of harm or foul, if that happens.
Yeah. It's also like the element of don't run this early. Please don't run this early.
Yes.
And then you do it and okay, thanks.
Yeah, we're out, we're going. It's not a perfect science because, as we tell our clients, this is not a lot of PR and communications is storytelling. We're telling stories, we're communicating the news, and we're using journalists and others and working with them to communicate to their audiences. So we don't own the journalists, we don't own the publications, we're not paying for this is not an ad. So it is more of a relationship and a negotiation, more of an art than a science.
Yep. Yep. Well put. All right, let's do this. Let's jump into case study number 2. This one is also for a bigger company, a professional service company. And this one's about that balance of using, the corporate owned channel as well as individual, executives or employees that work for the company. So take it away.
So this is a big consulting company. And as you know, consultants only have their brains to sell. And so really the consulting firm was looking to go deeper into the financial services industry and showcase the consulting firm within that space. So that was the challenge, how do we really build the brand within the financial services space with all we have is our people? So, it's kind of that corporate overlay of the consulting firm and the brand and the reputation of the consulting firm at the macro level, as well as the smart people that are the consultants doing the work every day. How do we build their brand and reputation as well? And really maximize and amplify and leverage the two. So really the goal is to leverage the corporate channels, the website, the digital channels, the Twitter feed, the LinkedIn company page with the executive profiles as well. As we know, all of your executives own their own LinkedIn channels. They may or may not want to use them on behalf of your business, but at the highest levels, mostly they play ball pretty easily. So with this particular case, we would leverage all of the corporate channels and the content and then take that content and share it and amplify it across all of the executive profiles over LinkedIn. We've been fortunate enough over the years for many, many executives to trust us with their LinkedIn profiles specifically, or they're like, hey, here are the keys. And we, work with them to develop content. But in this case, we were able to drive sales directly into the consulting firm by amplifying content, not only corporately, but also across the executive channels.
Yeah. So is this their software that helped facilitate this? Did you use a platform to do it? Or was this just more, we had access to 5-10 executives and we just did it natively on LinkedIn?
There are some technologies, but it's not ever plug and play. It's really, they can enable content to be shared across different platforms, but it takes a high touch approach, especially when you're talking about CEOs. We implemented this at another client. And I actually saw earlier today on LinkedIn, this client is doing a webinar on AI. And I probably got hit. I got hit corporately. I got hit with a few different executives that I know talking about this coming up. So if you think about marketing being a series of touch points and how often are you, touching people, that is a great way to do it, because as I look in my feed, I see the CEOs promoting about it. I see the marketing guys promoting about it. I see an executive vice president promoting it, as well as the corporate channels. And it kind of reinforces, maybe I should attend this. It's probably going to be pretty
Yeah.
smart.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, LinkedIn, so many people in the B2B space are on LinkedIn. So I think activation through individuals is great. When I look at the data, engagement, usually 2, sometimes 3x stronger than a brand or a corporate channel. Now, the balance there is obviously the brand or the corporate entity has tons and tons of followers. So it's not uncommon to say, well, this person has 10,000 connections and the corporate brand has 1 million followers. But, it's all about the right audience. I think that's the thing with LinkedIn is I'd rather have 100 impressions to my specific audience than 10,000 impressions to a lot of people.
That's right. It's quality, but it's also the amplification opportunity. The corporate sends it out and then it gets further amplified through, the engagement that happens. And then someone likes it and someone shares it and someone comments on it, and that then gets shared out. So it really has a compounding effect where it all works
Yep.
together really well. I also would mention that people fail to realize, everyone thinks of internal comms as using your internal comms channels. Well, LinkedIn is a great tool for internal comms, for
Yep.
building, relationships with your colleagues. And so if you think about corporate comms channels and leveraging every person that works at a company wants to be friends with the CEO. So they're connecting to the CEO, and, there's a bunch of people that the CEO may not run into every day, but can have direct
Yes.
communication with by using the LinkedIn channels.
Yeah. I think that's great. I think there was that line that people didn't want to cross. I remember I had a CEO of a company a long time ago. They just went all in on LinkedIn. And it really was, when I talked to him about it, he said that it was his way of staying connected to employees. It wasn't so much about clients because there was maybe 5,000, 6,000 people at the company. And if he was on the road and he was like meeting with new potential clients or at an industry event, that was his way to kind of like put his selfie up. And it was just a great way to stay connected.
Yeah.
And I think obviously on LinkedIn, the more authentic the content is, the better play it gets as far as like engagement. So what was for this consulting company? How did they define the success of this one? Like what made them say this worked or didn't work?
So we look at the tools, the same kinds of measurement tools that most marketers and communicators have: audience reach, engagement. But we also look at the anecdotal stories of, did this drive sales? People, if you think about just LinkedIn as the platform, or communicating a thought leadership across LinkedIn. And then all of a sudden, prospects would ping like, this is really smart. I would love to talk with you more about this. I've had this challenge recently, and you hit the nail on the head. This is great stuff. And it gives you immediately an opportunity for sales. And so we've been able to drive multiple millions of dollars in revenue by using those channels to communicate thought leadership content. So those kind of anecdotal stories, but really it is the data around audience reach and engagement.
Yep. All right. Thanks for sharing the study there. I'm going to jump into Q&A. Tell us about your first job in marketing or comms. I know that the marketing and comms worlds live side by side / together, but what was your first job?
So I came out of undergrad at Florida State University and moved immediately up to Minneapolis and worked for General Mills. I did an internship there at General Mills in the communications department, which I had no idea what I was getting into. I was just really excited. There was free cereal every morning. So it was amazing. But I got the opportunity to play a small part in doing a nationwide media tour with Colombo Yogurt, which was a General Mills brand at that time, and the U.S. Women's Olympic hockey team. So the brand took the hockey team. They had just won the gold medal in the Olympics, took them on a kind of skills and drills tour across the country, brought to you by Colombo Yogurt. And so I got to see, firsthand how you engage news in the local market to come out and cover something that's going on, how you manage the logistics of getting people from here to there, how you do brand activation and kind of bring the brand to life locally, how you get people there in the local market engaged and establish partnerships. So it was kind of really my first foray into public relations. And that's when I fell in love with it.
Yeah. So I didn't realize we had this in common. So my first job was in Minneapolis. This was an internship I had done for Campbell Mithun, which was an agency, and Campbell Mithun worked with some General Mills products. So were you at the corporate office? Was it just north of the highway? Was it 394 or 494?
It was just
I
north
forget
of
the
the
name of the highway.
highway, but I don't know.
Okay.
In Golden, I think, is the community,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, small world. I'm not going to share the years
No, I
that we
thought
were
that's where
doing
you were
those
going. I'm like,
internships.
abort,
No,
Steve, abort.
I'm like, I can't. I won't do that to you. But maybe I'm trying to now connect the women's hockey team gold medal success. And I don't know the year. And I'm not going to have you share the year for protection. What do you really love about comms or PR today? I mean, you've seen it go through this major shift of everything being digitally consumed. Like, what is it about today's world that you really enjoy?
I have loved being a part of this industry so much, mostly because of our ability to solve problems and challenges for our clients. The fact that news media has changed so much is, I think, just par for the course. Technology changes a lot. It's going to be ever changing. It's not like things used to be one way and now we have all this change and it's another way. It's accelerated, it's constantly changing, and you have to keep up with it. But it really is the same at its core. It's really the same. We're trying to communicate with people. We're trying to engage audiences. We're trying to persuade people to do something and to act. And so that challenge, how do we solve that challenge with the tools in our toolkit? That's what really gets me up every day. I just enjoy,
Yeah.
A client coming to us and saying, we really are trying to reach this audience, and we really dig in on how can we best do that.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask another question too on, I imagine every PR company, the worst client is one that they're all excited, they hire you, and then they want the token, like, I want to be on the front cover of this. You got 2 months to do it, go. Like, how do you manage a client like that? Because obviously, like, when those things happen, they're great, but they're never guaranteed and they take time. So how do you manage the expectations of someone who is newer to the PR world as far as what they should expect?
Well, our company name is Stretch PR for that very reason, to really find those stretch and set those stretch goals where you're striving for something and if you might not get there, but that is what you really want to aim for. And so we always say up front to our clients, hey, I don't know, this is a stretch. I don't know if we're going to get there, but we would love to, get that top tier placement in the first 2 months. It's a tall order.
Yep.
We're budget constrained. We're, time constrained. Here's how you can help us get there with our content, with our stories, with our experts and our spokespeople, with the data and research that we have. How can we bring those ingredients to make sure that the story resonates and, kind of gets us the traction that we're looking for. But,
Yep.
You don't know unless you try. But your client,
Yep.
Sometimes clients are people too. We all want the best for our companies and we want to, spend the least amount of money and get the highest result.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. What's your most interesting get, as they say, over your career? What are you most excited about?
the most fulfilling result is when you not only are managing a risk, if there's something that's kind of a difficult situation, navigating through that to have good success on the back end, I think is incredibly fulfilling. A lot of people, when they
Yep.
deal with crisis and issues, it's not great and fun to be there because you're dealing with something difficult, but to navigate people and personalities and actions and, put all that together and navigate through tricky waters and come out the other end is a very fulfilling experience.
Yeah, I got to tell you, that is one part that is so tough. And the folks who are in that crisis comms, who just have that like stoic calmness, whether it's just being a spokesperson to let people know that, there's stability here, or if there's bad information, we're going to correct it. That is such a skill, because in those moments, the person delivering that information, whether it's through, verbal or written, that's what it's all about. Like, something happens in the marketplace and you may have an hour to come up with something to make or break it.
Yeah.
Is if you misstep, you're going to fuel the fire. And if you do a good job, then people kind of go, oh, well, maybe this is not such a big deal after all. So that's an amazing skill.
It's tricky. And you also have a lot of stakeholders involved. You have C-level executive that wants things a certain way. You have attorneys that want it a certain way. You
Yeah.
have everybody factoring in, and you're the communicator. You know how people are going to receive things and you understand risk, but you also understand the need for transparency and honesty and integrity. You have to be that strong voice in the room so that, people don't make bad decisions or emotional
Yeah.
decisions or knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. Or just go with the no comment. I guess that's the worst thing you could say, right? There needs to be more context behind, at least sometimes if it's like investor relations related things, like instead of saying no comment, you have to say, unfortunately, we can't, we'd love to, but we can't comment on this because it has to do with, things that are related to the SEC and we just can't say anything.
Yeah. And then you can bridge to, but we can talk about our,
yes.
these things. Yeah.
Look at you. Look at you just working it in. Here's what we do want to talk about now that we have your attention. That's good. What is it about the work that you've done over your career that what's this thing that just drives you nuts? You're like, people, let's stop doing this. It's not productive. It's not helping your brand. What would you like to see eliminated?
I have seen over the years, and it's really different size of companies, different company stages, executives who may be a little skeptical about marketing and communications. And, they bring this level of skepticism and, we don't know what works or, does it really, we're really getting an ROI. I heard the other day, I'm a numbers person, and so I get it. I understand that for some people, it's not natural. They're down into a business operation and that's what they understand. But the discipline of marketing and communications to build a brand and reputation is unquestioned. And it is really important. It drives me crazy when executives think, since I don't understand it, it must not be important or it must not be valuable. That kind of drives me crazy. It's like, no, it's because you don't understand it that you don't think it's valuable. But I can point to, 50 different case studies to show you how valuable it is. And you're really missing out if you don't figure it out.
Yeah. All right. My final question to you is, what can you share, this audience, it's all B2B marketers. What can you share with someone who's not really into the PR game? Maybe they've worked with an agency here and there. What's your advice to get them thinking about it's not just about traditional thought leadership or doing ad campaigns? What would you, if you were in the room for their annual planning process, what would you advise them on how to get started?
I think the key is for them to think about what is our storytelling strategy. If you think about it from that level, what is our selling strategy? What is our advertising strategy? And what is our storytelling strategy? How are we getting our message out there? How are we getting people to feel passionate about our company? How are we getting people to understand the value we bring to our clients? And that's all storytelling. So that's where the communicators can come in to position the company well, to tell great stories, and to make sure that those stories are reaching the right audience, so that audience actually does something or feels something different. So I would say just, if you think about the tools in the marketing toolkit, this is your storytelling tool, and you need to make sure that you use it.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Well, Amy, thanks for joining us today. I've enjoyed getting to know that our careers may have started at the same year. I have to do some research now about the hockey team.
Luckily, they've won a few times. So we'll go with the most recent win.
All right. I like it. You're like, I started 6 years ago.
Exactly. It was very recent, very recent.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us. And thank you all to the listeners. Make sure to like and subscribe. You can listen to this podcast, many, many channels. I'm not going to list all of them, but I will do a shout out to the 26 Characters website. That's where we catalog all of the previous episodes. So thanks again, Amy, and looking forward to seeing everyone next time on Studio 26. This is Interesting B2B Marketers podcast. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Interesting B2B Marketers podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss an episode. If you found value in today's episode, please help grow the podcast by sharing with others and leaving a review. We'll see you next time.